Somebody asked me earlier today, they said, Trevor, are you free today? I looked up in the background, I heard the roar of a 1969 Ford Mustang. I heard a bald eagle screech. A single tear shed from my eye. I looked him right in the eye and I said, partner, I live in America. I'm free every day. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Resurgency Podcast. The Resurgency Podcast has, if you will, made a resurgence. Now, it was not my intention to leave you all a month, 2 months without a podcast. Life happens, things happen, but they happened. And it's over now. We're moving on. I have gotten situated in a good spot in an undisclosed location in Middle Tennessee. I'm loving it here, and it is great. Now, something that I'd just like to say, just off on a tangent about being in Tennessee, and I think Tennessee is a great state, and I think it is a great state that represents the greatest attitudes of Americans. When you compare the folks of a state like Tennessee to the folks of a state like California, the folks of California are just kind of like waiting and letting the government tell them what to do. Now, for the most part, right? Come out here to Tennessee and it's like, no, we're going to do what we want to do. And the government, you're just going to have to stay out of the way. So long as no laws are broken. And then maybe then some, as long as nobody's looking. Like, we're just going to kind of be free Americans here. We're just going to do what we do here. It feels like a much more free state. I think it feels much more like the heartland of America. So I love that I'm out here. Love that I made it out here to be here in celebrating July 4th. I'm looking forward to it. Now, we have an absolutely awesome last few weeks to go over. I think it is so cool, the things that have happened in the last couple weeks, that they have happened leading up to the 4th of July, the birthday, if you will, of the Declaration of Independence. Founders coming together and saying, hey, we're going to do our own thing. And if you don't like it, you're going to have to fight a war over it. And fight a war they did. And the Americans won. And we are here today. And we are reaping the benefits of that. We are reaping the benefits of freedom. We're reaping the benefits of every single man and woman who have given their lives to defend the great ideas, ideals, and the foundations of this awesome, awesome country. We're very thankful for that. But that leads us to today. So we got some cool things to go over. Life, religious freedom, Second Amendment freedom. Two huge things in America, right? We all have the right to life, right? We all have the right to have freedom of speech, the freedom of ideas, the freedom of beliefs. We all have the rights to defend ourselves. And over the last few weeks, these three things have been widely expanded. They've been recognized as, previously there were restrictions on these, and recently there have been recognitions that these things need to be expanded. Those restrictions need to go. So what are we talking about first? Well, I am very thrilled to say that America has become a better country. We have become a more moral country in recent weeks, and that is in the wake of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Now, the Supreme Court, a couple weeks ago, they had a case come down out of Mississippi, and it was essentially a challenge to Roe v. Wade. They couldn't really just take the case as is. It was very obvious, very apparent that this case was going to impact Planned Parenthood v. Casey, which was on the back of Roe v. Wade, the foundational Supreme Court case that that opened up abortion, throughout the nation. And Roe versus Wade itself was an absolutely terrible, terrible court decision. They came up with uh, they came up with a non-existent right, the right to privacy. The right to privacy is not in the Constitution, and they said so. Based off this right to privacy, you now get the right to kill your unborn child. So it's a terrible court decision. In the Supreme Court case that overturned Roe, they talk about that a lot. How it was a bad decision. It was time to overturn the case. And not only was it just a terrible legal decision, but because of Roe v. Wade, abortion just became widespread throughout the United States, and millions and millions and millions of unborn babies have died as a result of the Supreme Court decision of Roe v. Wade. Now, this is a huge victory, right? Now, it's not everything, right? This doesn't outlaw abortion completely. What it does is it just kicks the issue back down to the states, as we know. It's not everything, but it's a good start. Why is it a good start? Because you had 13 states, one of which I'm proud to now be a resident of, had these things called trigger laws. So they had laws put in place that as soon as Roe v. Wade was overturned, abortion would become illegal in those states. And what does this mean? This means that when Roe v. Wade was overturned, people lived. There were any abortions that were scheduled after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Those innocent unborn babies, they now get to live. Right? There are going to be people walking around 20, 30, 40 years from now, so on, who were born post overturning of Roe, and perhaps their mother was one of the ones who was considering an abortion, but then the laws changed, and their mothers could no longer access this incredibly evil operation, this incredibly evil act, and they had to go through with their pregnancy. They carried their child to term, and that child has lived. This is absolutely wonderful. Now, it's been incredible to me to see the reaction to the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Of course, we have the pro-abort leftists who are just so rampant in their vocalization. There are protests throughout the country, although I should say that these protests were pretty underwhelming compared to what some of these leftists were saying that they were going to do. It was rather underwhelming turnout. Excuse me. But nonetheless, they mobilized, and they became very vocal, and people paid attention for about like 5 seconds, and then it moved on. No, but I mean, people were posting about this. They were very upset about the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and then about 5 days later, people just kind of stopped caring. Why was that the case? Well, it's the case because a lot of these folks who are so pro-abortion, they already live in states that nothing's going to change, right? They're still going to have access to abortion, to ending their unborn child, ending their unborn children's lives. And these folks may not even know that. But then at the same time, most Americans, they don't really find themselves hard on one side or the other. Most people are actually against late-term abortions. That seems to be what the consensus of the United States is. People, it's a sense position to be pro-life because we recognize that hey, there's something in that womb. What is it? It's not inanimate, right? Or else it wouldn't have gotten there in the first place, right? It's not dead, or else you wouldn't need the abortion. So it must be living, right? Okay, so it's alive, and it's growing, right? It has anything that a growing living organism needs, which is nutrition, an environment, and time, and then some, and then because of those three things, it grows. So this thing is living. So what is this thing that is living? Well, let's look at the DNA. And oh, what do you know? At conception, it has human DNA. So this is a living human being from the time of conception. We understand this, that it's the common sense idea. If you believe, like most folks do, that it's wrong to kill innocent people, aka murdering, then we should not do this to unborn babies. It's really the simple position of the pro-life side. um, but uh, but unfortunately, the I have seen a lot of folks who just kind of lean into the pro-choice, the pro-abortion side, and it's really sad because the far left has just completely distorted reality. They have distorted what the facts are, and frankly, they're just pushing out lies. So the biggest thing that I think is the most egregious is this idea that if abortion is overturned, then all these medical issues that happen to women in pregnancies, they will no longer be able to be treated. And it's completely wrong. It's completely false. If you ever listen to a doctor who deals with unborn unborn babies, right, who are dealing with treating a pregnant woman, they they will tell you that in no case is it ever necessary to abort a child to save the mother's life or to provide care for the mother. And this is a really, really key distinction because you have to think about it. If something is going wrong with the child, right? What are the options? Either the child can be delivered via C-section, and we all have heard of children who are born prematurely, let's say, right? Something goes wrong and they have to be born prematurely, but they make it. And as technology progresses, it's going to get to the point where earlier and earlier on in the pregnancy, they're going to be able to deliver that child via C-section. So if there's any issues with that child, they can deliver it, right? They don't need the abortion. And then, from my understanding, in cases where the child would not make it, it's never a result of an abortion, right? An abortion is the intentional ending of the life of the unborn child through invasive means. Now, um, there is a big difference between miscarriage and abortion, right? Again, the abortion is the intentional killing. Miscarriage is things go wrong, and unfortunately, the child does not make it. And something I want to say to these folks who are on the left who have conflated a miscarriage with abortion is really like, I want to say that you're very evil, and this is very hurtful to women who have had miscarriages, because each and every woman who has had the terrible tragedy of having a miscarried child knows that they would have done every single thing possible to have that child live, to survive. And they know for sure that they did not go through with anything like an abortion. And so to say to women who have had miscarriages, oh, what you did, it's kind of the same thing as an abortion, right? Like, this is incredibly wrong, and it's incredibly evil to these women. And I can't. It's so incredibly inconsiderate of these women who have dealt with real trauma. So really, just no respect at all for anybody who conflates a miscarriage and an abortion. And a lot of people have believed these lies that uh, the overturning of Roe versus Wade would mean women wouldn't have access to these things. No, there is the good thing is that all of these pro-life laws, they always in every single case allow for doctors to operate to save the woman's life, to save the child's life, right? To do everything that they can to save a woman's life and the child's life. Again, there's just a big difference between the intentional killing of the unborn child and things going wrong for seemingly natural reasons, right? Um, so to bring it back to the overturning of Roe versus Wade again, it's a big deal, and I really hope to see that the pro-life movement continues. This is not the time uh, to give up in any ways, right? The pro-life side is just getting going because it's still wrong. It doesn't matter what a state says or not. It's still wrong to kill innocent human beings, whether or not they're in the womb or they're out of the womb. So the states that are still have it legal, it's still wrong there, and I still believe that we should work to put those policies um, away, put them to rest, and create life. Right. This is the most beautiful part of the pro life side is that at the end of the day, we are advocating for life. We are advocating for people to experience more beauty, more joy in their lives, and more responsibility. More responsibility is a good thing, and the terrible part of in the wake of the overturn of Roe versus Wade, and really whenever abortion comes into the public discourse, is that we see how selfish a lot of these people are, because most of the time the reasons that they give are, it's they say my body, my choice, and what they mean is, I want my life to go however I want it, and if a kid isn't fitting with that, then I'm going to end its life. Um, not even considering adoption, which um, man, to take a sidestep. I'm just kind of going through all these things in my mind, and there's so many things we could touch on, right? I bring up the thing of adoption, and the pro-choice side has distorted that to say that children won't be adopted, and it's like, no, there's waiting lists for infants, um, and then just the people will respond. Pro-choice folks will respond to the idea that abortion is only about the choice of the mother, and they're like, oh well, what about all these medical cases and whatnot, and rape and incest and whatnot. The reality is, um, when you look at the numbers, less than 1% of abortions are due to rape and incest, and I think it's about that are claimed to be medical reasons, though I suspect that it's because they're with a doctor who is just very pro-abortion and stands to profit a lot from that. As any seasoned, OBGYN or doctor who deals with pregnant women will tell you, that you never need to intentionally end the life of a child to treat a woman. No, the vast majority, I'm talking over 95%, even 98% of abortions are done just out of convenience, simply because the woman doesn't want the child. And this is really sad. And so I think the biggest call to action for anyone listening, for myself, is just to spread the idea that maybe you are in a bad circumstance to have a child, whatever bad means. Maybe you're just in a less than ideal position. The fact is that that child is going to allow you to love in a way that you've never loved before. And that child is going to bring so much joy to you. It's going to grow you as a person. And you have no idea how much more colorful and rich life can be with that child. And it's a beautiful thing, and we want each and every person to experience that, especially people who get pregnant. Right, you've already signed up for it, and the fact is you're bearing the responsibilities of your actions, right? And by actions, I mean procreative actions. Okay, anyways, we are going to move on. I've spoken a lot about abortion. You could check out my other podcast. I do have a podcast going against all of the most pro-choice arguments, where I do it in a formal manner, not so off the cuff like I am doing right now. All right, next case. So more life in the United States, beautiful, right? Now we get to the part of more religious liberty. So we have the case Kennedy v. Bremerton School District. we have a high school football coach who, after games, would kneel on the 50-yard line and he would say a prayer, usually silently. And the school district ended up firing him because the claim was that he was doing this in an official capacity, and he was spreading it to the people around him, mainly the students that he oversaw, the athletes that he coached. And through a lot of different back and forths as it went up the chain all the way up to the Supreme Court, it wasn't very clear. And then Neil Gorsuch gives a very, very good opinion. I do recommend you read Neil Gorsuch's opinion on this. Um, he states that it's very simple. When you're acting, even if you're being paid by the government, when you're acting in a capacity that's just personal action, right? You're not actually overseeing, you're not telling anyone to do this, you're not making it necessary to achieve anything, to earn anything. You're just behaving on your own, right? You have the liberty to do, to exercise your First Amendment rights. And one thing that I think is a really good point that he really brings up too, is he says, well, you know, when the coach was kneeling down to pray, he could have been giving hugs to his family in the stands. He could have been calling, you know, calling a restaurant to make reservations. Right? He could have been doing anything. Um, that is to say, it's his personal time. And so the great takeaway from that is that even when you're working in the giant for the giant beast that is the government, you still have a lot of liberties, and rightly so, to exercise your religious beliefs. And another point that Neil Gorsuch brings up, which is really good, is if we were to go against Kennedy, right, the coach, then that would actually be a precedent for, you know, if somebody wanted to tell a Muslim woman that she could not wear a hijab while she was working, right, for a government entity, then this would be case. This would set the precedent for them to have the right to tell her that she couldn't do that, or someone who's just praying for their meal at lunch on their own time, right? It's like they would now have the precedent to say, no, you can't do that. And the reason why I think this is, it almost sounds common sense, right? Especially with the idea of religious freedom. I remember reading through the case and thinking, how on earth could they have sided the other way? Like this is obviously just common sense religious freedom, right? It's like I'm eating a sandwich and I want to pray for it. Who is who to tell me that I can't do that? And then in the case of this coach, right? It's like after a game, on my own time, I'm going to go and I'm going to kneel and I'm going to thank God for everything. And the reason why it's common sense is because I believe religious freedom is such a foundational right to every single person under the sun, right? It's I think it's an inherent right, an intrinsic right, right. As the founders would have said, a self-evident right, that is an inalienable right that is self-evident, because when people get the authority to start controlling your actions, right, saying a prayer, wearing religious uh, accessories, if you will, when people have the right to start controlling those actions get suppressed, right? And then the practice goes away, right? In those periods of time, the practice goes away. And then what does diminishing the practice do? It ends up diminishing the internal, right? If you diminish your outward practice of your beliefs, it's it's it will in turn diminish the internal. So how I apply this and how I think this works out, and I think it rings true for every single person, is I don't think it's enough to just say I have these beliefs that I hold in my own, but then I'm just going to kind of live my life however I want. It's like, no, you should have, if you have these beliefs, find tangible ways to live them out, right? And find tangible ways to practice them. That's what I mean. An actual external practicing, something where literally that you in the physical world are exercising these beliefs, whether it be wearing something, whether it be kneeling down and praying, acts of kindness or charity, things like that. Speaking, right? Speaking to other people. Uh, these are all ways that we practice what we believe in. And it's I don't think it's any question that people who would say like, oh, I have these internal beliefs, but then my external life doesn't reflect that in any way, right? They're not, they don't want to exercise those things. It's like, when you press them on their internal beliefs, it's like, maybe they don't really believe them. Uh, Anyways, that's another discussion. But very happy, very excited to see religious liberty went out. Something I am curious about is, to what extent can government officials say no because of religious beliefs? Now, I don't know if there has been a previous court case dealing with this question. I'm sure there has been, but if there hasn't, I think that'll be very interesting. I will be interested to see when more and more and more school districts make, uh, you know, critical race theory, whole LGBTQ gender theory nonsense, all of that more, you know, mandatory to teach. And we start seeing teachers who are saying, no, I'm not going to teach that BS. I'll be very interested to see if see whatever court cases there are that come about that, what those court cases decide. And it's an interesting discussion to be had. I'm tempted to almost sort of entertain those thoughts, because, well, why not? So on the one hand, you have like, you are a government employer, right? You can't, if you were, or employee rather, if you were an employee of a company and you started practicing things that were contrary to your religious, or if they made you practice things that were contrary to your religious beliefs, and you said no, right, would the employer then have the right to fire you? And in the private sphere, I do think that they would have that right. Um, but well, no. See, I again, I realize that actually doesn't work because employers, and this is the government, right? Employers, and the government has said that you cannot discriminate based off of religious beliefs. Um, it's interesting. I don't have fully fleshed out ideas on that. Um, so yeah, it's one to think on for sure. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see if anything arises in schools, especially teachers coming out and saying that they're not going to teach on these things, and what happens to them if there's going to be any court decisions on that. And that would actually work against the school districts with the precedent that the government has set over employers, right? The the government has sided with employers, saying, you can't discriminate based off religious beliefs. Um, and so it's like, okay, now are you going to apply that same standard to the employees of the government, right, in public schools? Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if and how that plays out. All right, another Supreme Court case that's a big deal, the conceal carry case out of New York. So previously, well, we all kind of just understand that New York State is just a terrible state to be a gun owner, just absolutely abhorrent restrictions on the Second Amendment, and the Supreme Court came down and said, nope, the right to bear arms does indeed apply to conceal carry, carrying it on your person for the right to self-defense. Now, there was an interesting op-ed that came out of the New York Times that said, essentially, I'm a liberal and I want to conceal carry, right? So this person who, by all metrics, would be anti-Second Amendment, they're living in New York City and they're like, you know what, I do want to carry. And it really shows something that is interesting. It's that we all understand that we have the right to our lives, right? To live. We have the right to life, right? That goes back to overturning of Roe v. Wade. We have the right to life. And if we have that basic right, if it's no one else's right to take that from you, right? Unjustifiably, right? If you are innocent and the other person is unjustified, no one has the right to take that life from you, take your life from you. And so therefore you have the right to defend your life. And this is just kind of right common sense. And so yeah, absolutely. You, by whatever means necessary that you can defend your life, you should have access to that. And I believe that's exactly what the founders had in mind. Self-defense, defense of your community, defense of your state, defense of your country. This is why each and every person has the right to bear arms. And so you see someone like coming out of New York saying, hey, my party is not for it, but I would really like a gun. Why? Because it's dangerous in New York City. It's incredibly dangerous. Crime has gone up there. And frankly, it's just fascinating that some of the most gun restrictive areas of the country have the highest amounts of crime in them. And it kind of makes sense because, right, as I've come out here to living in Tennessee, it's much more common for people to carry. You will see people carrying out here. It's a what's known as a constitutional carry state. So you just need Tennessee driver's license, right, to carry on. You can concealed or open, and you think about it, and the more you get to know other people, you get to know who's you kind of know people. Oh, they found out that they're packing. I found out this person's packing. You get to see who's all packing and whatnot, and you're like, there's a lot of people packing, and it's like, huh, man, if I was a criminal, I would not be feeling very lucky because odds are you're going to run into somebody who's packing. And let me tell you, folks who carry guns, they carry folks who carry guns legally, right, in law-abiding citizens, they're responsible with their gun ownership, and part of that responsibility is knowing how to use your gun. So that is something that I would like to make very clear on is while I am very pro Second Amendment, very pro you absolutely have the right to carry. I'm very much a fan of the Supreme Court case. Um, Not that it's the government's job to tell you to do this, but because it is a good thing to do, you should be a responsible carrier of that weapon, meaning you should know how to use it. Because if, God forbid, you ever have to, you should use it in the most efficient way that is going to cause the least amount of damage to innocent bystanders, right? And only the most and efficient damage to the guilty parties involved, if you catch my drift. So anyways, good stuff coming out of the Supreme Court with that decision. Unfortunately, there's already talks in New York State about really trying to just work around every single way to for the government to say no. You know, like the Supreme Court in this decision has severely rolled back the government overreach, but that governor out of New York, absolute terrible, wicked, evil, and sometimes brainless person, just really trying her best to see still every way possible that she and her government can get her hands into your life and restrict your right to carry, and that's sad. So I still advocate moving to a much more free state where people just get it. And folks, I'll say the folks out in Tennessee, folks in Texas, and Idaho, um, other places in the South, Oklahoma, they just get it. Okay. And sorry, if another thing I'd like to just say on that is the awful thing about it is that all of these government officials, they're all guarded by people who have firearms on them, right? And those people will not hesitate to use it if that person's life is ever jeopardized or threatened. And it's such a disconnect from them and from the rest of us, right? The folks who live in reality, who are not up in our ivory towers, and we're responsible for protecting our lives, right? We can't really give it up to the government because how quickly can someone take your life? Incredibly quickly. How long is the government going to get to you if someone's threatening your life? 6, 8 minutes if you're lucky. So we do not have the luxury to outsource our protection to people in our immediate physical distance. No, we have to do that ourselves, and that's why we get that right. But then these folks in their offices, they say, no, 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 it's okay. I have the right because I'm important, right? I'm important. I should be protected. But you just don't know what you're doing. If we let you have guns, you're going to be criminals and whatnot. And that's essentially how they see us, right? And without going into detail, I will just say you would be surprised, uh, you know, how many of these politicians who are not pro Second Amendment have guns and in some cases have certain licenses and permits for those guns. And that's all I'll say on that. You'd be surprised. Okay. A couple cultural wins that I want to go over. So those were super huge, big Supreme Court wins. We definitely want to give a big shout out to our boy Donnie T, President Donald Trump. After his presidency, he's winning still with these Supreme Court cases. More life, more religious liberty, more Second Amendment liberty. The man still finds a way to win, and that's because of all the work that he did, and the party really to get constitutional traditionalist justices on the bench. Really, really good work. All right, so we did Supreme Court wins. Now let's do some very cool wins in the culture. Just a couple I want to go over. First one, Matt Walsh's What is a Woman documentary. If you have not seen it, please go see it. It is so shocking. It's really well made, and there's a lot of times where you're going to laugh. There's a lot of times in it where your skin is going to crawl. You're going to be appalled at how bad some things are with the transgender ideology. And the interesting thing is that Matt Walsh goes around and he asks all these folks who are gender theorists and sex change. That's not even possible, but they go by sex change surgeons and these trans affirming therapists, and he talks to all of them. And something that I really respect about Matt Walsh in this documentary is that he just kind of sits there and he asks them questions and he lets them just spew their nonsense, to spew their even evil ideology. And when he comes across as he might appear like he's neutral at first, right? And then they kind of open up a little bit to him. And then he gives them some questions of like, well, it seems like, well, to play devil's advocate. And they're more open up to him. They reveal more. And then he really starts pressing them. And then it culminates into the very simple question of what is a woman? And they lose their mind, right? It breaks them. It's awesome. And the really, really, really scary thing about this is that it is the trans ideology is so much more pervasive nowadays. And the I think the most pivotal moment in the film is when Scott Nugent, she's a woman, goes by the name Scott, who transitioned. Uh, she she is now spending her life advocating against this whole gender reassignment surgery and whatnot. And she says, like, I was in my 40s and they got me. Like, your kids have no chance. And of course, right, as Matt Walsh has followed up with this in his own personal commentary, it's like, yeah, you know, if you just let your kids live in the world that we are in today and you don't guide them as you should, tell them, help them differentiate right from wrong, reality from non-reality, they will absolutely be convinced by this transgender ideology. And there's certainly evidence for it, as the percentage of people who identify as trans is just skyrocketing. If you look at the generations, Gen Z has huge numbers of trans identifying people, and it's the biggest reason why it breaks my heart is because these people have no idea what they're signing up for when they go in to mutilate their bodies, and that is what they're doing. And they think that it's going to bring them happiness, and it does not. And that's something that Scott Nugent says, is that any study done on the happiness of folks after they transition that is worth its salt, that is not pandering to the left, that is not funded by these left-wing institutes, they say that actually people get worse after they transition. And it's no secret why. These people have ruined their bodies. They've mutilated their bodies. Their bodies don't work anymore like they should, like they were designed to. And they don't even work like the other gender that they were trying to transition to. It's not even close to that either. It's just, it becomes this neutered, mutilated, scarred, dysfunctional body that this person has just brought upon themselves. And it makes life harder for them. They don't get to experience certain things that a lot of other folks get to experience. Right, the biggest one is um, uh, just a fulfilled sexual lifestyle. Right, they don't get to experience that because they've mutilated their sexual organs, and it's an awful thing. And I would encourage you, if you are curious on this, to listen to folks who have quote unquote detransitioned, who have undergone the gender reassignment surgery and regretted it and tried their very best to go back. And perhaps the thing that's even worse about it is that these gender reassignment surgeries actually have a really good chance in causing sickness, tons of health risks, even cancer, to these people who do these things. And they're trying to do this stuff before kids even hit puberty. And it's so scary to think that it's not scary to think that the kids buy into it because they're just kids, right? It's scary that the parents are buying into it, because it is, after all, on the parents when kids do these things. So I cannot recommend the What is a Woman documentary enough. Go over to Daily Wire Plus. They're Daily Wire Plus now. That's what they're going under. And you'll have to subscribe. And you might even have the idea, like, why do I need to pay money why do I have to pay for a subscription to watch this? Now, first of all the other streaming platforms do that. When Netflix releases a documentary, you got to sign up, become a subscriber of Netflix to watch it, right? So there's nothing new there. But the other thing is that it's with the subscription model that the Daily Wire Plus is able to make money. It's how they're able to fund these things. You know, I was listening to their CEO speak about it, and he was like, buying these memberships, they allow us to invest in these future products. And so when you pay for a subscription and then you see the documentary, I think you'll immediately say, yeah, that was money well spent, and my money is going to a good company who is not trying to beat me over the head with woke ideology. In fact, they're trying to instill good values in their films. They're trying to bring light to the things that are threatening those good values as well. And plus, it's not just a movie you're signing up for. Personally, as a member of Daily Wire Plus, I see all their other great content, and it is really, really good content. I will get back to that in a second. Now, another interesting win, kind of, sort of, in the culture is the um, over Pride Month, there was a terrible, terrible sight to see, which was a drag show that where kids were invited. The event was, I kid you not, was it drag your kids to Pride? And children, there's videos of this in Dallas, Texas, of all places, right? We think that Texas would be beyond it, but evidently not. Um, these cross-dressing drag queens, and I have shared my opinion on these drag queens in previous episodes, so definitely go check that out. It's I stir the pot a lot. It's particularly in my history podcast that I just did recently, the parts 1 and 2. I talk about it there, but these drag queens are dancing, twerking, very sexually provocative in front of all of these children, and it's just an absolutely awful thing to see. Now, the first and most reasonable response is to say these people are pedophiles, they're predators, right? Sexualizing children at a young age, that is predatory groomer behavior. There's really no way you slice it, right? Any way you slice it, it's they're predators, and you think, well, obviously this is wrong, because if you took a child into a strip club and you showed them what was going on in there, everyone would say the adult is a criminal. Any person who let that child in is a criminal. Um, we would all get that, no problem. But the second that it's for pride, the second that it's for, right, transgenderism, a drag, and all that stuff, oh, suddenly it's okay. No, it's not okay. What's wrong is wrong, and what we've always known to be wrong is still wrong in this case with these drag shows. And something that I'm really frustrated about that no one is talking about is the incredibly damaging effects of early exposure to sexual content. There is incredibly seriously huge damaging effects of being exposed to sexual content at an early age. And it's really, really obvious to me because I've spent like 5 minutes listening to a podcast or watching a show on serial killers and serial rapists, right? Like isn't that something that Americans are always obsessed about, is listening to podcasts and watching shows on serial killers and whatnot. And then in every single one of them, they always mention how these serial killers at a young age, they were exposed to sexually explicit content. Okay, so where's the how come nobody is seeing that? And no one's saying that too, which is kind of beyond me. It's like we all are fascinated by these shows. We would think that we would pick up on the fact that all of these terrible monsters were exposed to sexual content early on. So I don't know, maybe it's a bad thing to do that, and we should err on the safe side and not even let kids get even a mile close to that sort of content. Anyways, that's not the win. The win is a Texas lawmaker putting in legislation. I'm not sure if it's gone through yet, but they're saying, okay, that should have been illegal, and it was, but we're going to make sure it is. And their Texas lawmaker putting in legislation to say, hey, you're not taking kids to a drag show. This is wrong. You're not allowed to do it. It's against the law. And I tip my cap off to him. Literally, as I scratch my head, I am tipping my cap off to him because this is a serious law against the trans movement, against LGBTQ ideology, gender ideology, this whole pride thing. This is a serious offensive move towards it, and I think it is a good thing. Lawmakers need to have a spine. We need to call our lawmakers to have a spine. We need to vote for lawmakers who have spines. And when they have a spine, they do things like this. And what is the benefit? The benefit is kids are not exposed to sexual content early on in this case, right? They're not being shoved down their throats gender ideology that is only going to hurt them and confuse them, and frankly, a gender ideology that they can't even understand. Most cases, most adults can't understand it because it is nonsense and it's a house of cards. All right. Um, Hopefully, I wasn't pulling my punches on that one. So I want to take a quick turn as we are celebrating America. I want to take a quick turn to. It's not really a celebration. It's actually more of a downer thing. I'm sorry to be a downer, a Debbie Downer on this one, but there is a story involving Chris Pratt, and I am sad to see it. Uh, Chris Pratt has undergone a lot of success recently with his films that have come out. He just had a show come out just this past Friday called The Terminal List, written by Jack Carr. Jack Carr is a former Navy SEAL turned author. I watched the first episode. It's a fantastic first episode, a pilot, if you will. I do intend to watch every bit of it. Some really good actors in there, and Chris Pratt does a great job of, we all think of Chris Pratt as this sort of kind of funny, silly guy, and he plays that role very well. But in this show, he's very serious acting, and from what I can tell, with the first episode of the series, very believable, very wonderful, and it just also strikes me as a patriotic show, right? So I would recommend it. It's very much in keeping with 4th of July, right? Patriotism. I think the show so far gives off the tones of loving his country. Hopefully, I don't eat my words when I finish it. But knowing that Jack Carr wrote the book that inspired the show, and they actually let Jack Carr oversee the show itself. A lot of Hollywood productions don't let authors oversee the production. They let him in, and listening to Jack Carr a lot, knowing the work he's put out there, I know they put out some really solid content. But anyways, I come to Chris Pratt because I think some recent news about him is really indicative of where we are at as a country, and as part of the birthday, if you will, of a country. I think it's always good to take stock of your life at your birthday. And so we should kind of take stock a little bit and where are we at as a country. And his story, I think, is something that's very indicative of where we're at as a country. So Chris Pratt, in his personal life, he's been kind of seen as this Christian guy, right? He's always really kind of been quiet about politics, and when he speaks about religion, he's rather Christian. He's saying he's Christian, and he believes in Jesus. In fact, what was it? It was, oh, I just kicked my camera a little bit. Let me get that straight. Okay, sorry about that. But it was a few years ago. He was at the uh, MTV Movie and TV Awards, and he got this award, and he stood up there, and the thing that was incredibly beautiful about his speech is that not only does he call his listeners to things that will make them or allow them to have a better life, but he actually calls them to believe in God, to pray to God. And he draws out the whole process of, you're a sinner and you need grace, and grace is a beautiful thing, and grace empowers you. He says it in a little bit softer language, right? He is in Hollywood, so he can't use the big words like sinner, um, and forgiveness, if you will. But he definitely delivers a message, and it's really good, considering the message is never shared. In fact, it's attacked in Hollywood. For him to stand up on that stage and deliver a Christian message is a really, really cool thing. And in some cases, some Hollywood folks have even come out and attacked Chris Pratt for his Christian beliefs. And he has not necessarily backpedaled on them, under attack recently. And he's even had his coworkers come up uh, to defend him, other actors, producers, and directors in Hollywood and whatnot. So he is. in my mind, I saw him as there is still a little bit of hope um, in this world, right? In even in the most degenerate atmosphere of Hollywood that it has become, there still is a guy like Chris Pratt who's great. He's funny and he's a good guy, and he, for the most part, open about his Christian beliefs. All that is to say, it's a big build up to be let down, is that he's sort of come out and just backpedaled on the whole thing. He's sort of renounced it in a way. He says he still believes in God, but I'll just read part of the interview, and the interview is in Men's Health. He says, talking about that award ceremony, he says, maybe it was hubris for me to stand up on the stage and say the things that I said. I'm not sure I touched anybody. Religion has been oppressive AF, except he doesn't say AF, for a long time. He says, I didn't know that I would kind of become the face of religion when I'm really not a religious person. I think there's a distinction between being religious, adhering to the customs created by man, oftentimes appropriating the awe reserved for who I believe is a very real God, and using it to control people, to take money from people, to abuse children, to steal land, to justify hatred, whatever it is. The evil that's in the heart of every single man has glommed onto the back of religion and come along for the ride. Uh, and then he goes on to say, it has recently been suggested that I belong to a church which hates a certain group of people and is infamously anti-LGBTQ. Nothing could be further from the truth. I am a man who believes that everyone is entitled to love who they want, free from the judgment of their fellow man. Um, so, I mean, he says some other things, but that's really kind of the crux of his renunciation, if you will. When you really listen to it, it's not so much. It's not a complete outright like even this line right here, right? I am a man who believes that everyone is entitled to love who they want, free from the judgment of their fellow man. Um, maybe he says that to get him off the hook of the whole LGBTQ thing, but maybe in his heart he's still saying like, well, they're free of the judgment of man, but they're not free of the judgment of God, right? He still kind of leaves that a little bit ambiguous, if you will. And then the comments that he says about kind of religion and things like that, it's in some ways it's true, right? That religion has been used as a way to do some real evil in the world, but it's sad for him. It's sad to see him say that it's the institution itself, right? That's what he believes is the cause of it. And the reality is that it's not the institution, it's who runs it, and it's man, right? Men who run institution. Every institution that you see is corrupted by man. The best example, right? Everyone likes to point to the Catholic Church for all the sexual abuse that has gone on, and it is terrible, and it should absolutely be condemned to the fullest degree. And on the other hand, people don't realize that the most recent study back in 2004, why that's the most recent is beyond me, but back in 2004, the number of teachers who have committed um, just acts of sexual indecency with a student, right? Whether it be rape or uh, right? It's rape or statutory rape, molestation, unsolicited advances and things like that. The numbers are actually dwarf the Catholic Church, and right, this is supposed to be a secular institution, right? The separation of church and state, if you will, and yet teachers are still perpetrating these heinous acts. And it just goes to show you that it's not inherent to a religious institution. It's just inherent to any institution that is run by man. And if anything, Christianity gets that because we believe that every single human being is fallen. And because of that fallen nature, um, every institution that man sort of erects is going to run that risk of dealing with the fall, right? And so it I think it's sad for the most part. Um, Now, is he renouncing Christianity? Not necessarily, right? I mean, he didn't come out and say it. I think if he wanted to, he could have used a lot stronger and more choice words for sure. But I think it is the biggest move of appeasement to to the left. I think he is saying the most he can do, the most he can say to appease the left and still somewhat hold on to his religious beliefs. But in the end, it's it's not going to cut it, right? I believe in the end, and it's who who has the final say in his life. Now, based off of this interview, it would mean that his career in Hollywood has the final say, because he is subjecting his religious views to the dogma of of Hollywood, to the beliefs of Hollywood, and not the other way around. Because I think if it was the other way around, he would have stronger and choice words, but it would not be in the direction of renouncing the faith. It would be, um, it would sound much different. And so why do I bring this up? I believe that over the last few years, we have started to see a shift in the tone of the United States. Now, there was the famous quote. I believe it was by Adams. Was it by Adams? Um, I think it was Adams. I could be wrong, but or maybe it was Madison. Oh my goodness, I'm getting my founders mixed up. Apologies. One of the founders said the Constitution is written for a moral and religious people, and it has been the tradition of the United States that we are Christian, right? There is this idea of separation of church and state at the government level, but the social level, the United States has always been a Christian nation. Now, Christianity has certainly been in decline in the West, and it's certainly been in decline in the United States over the last few decades. But from what I can tell, from what I gather, about a decade ago, decade ago, excuse me, sorry for that little voice crack there. um, a decade ago, I was. It seemed to me that you could still kind of comfortably identify as a Christian, a practicing Christian nonetheless, and you could go by relatively unscathed. Maybe you're not vocal about your um, views on whatever issue, but people would understand, even if you believed in Christianity that was right. If you were a Christian, a correct Christian in the views that that a homosexual lifestyle is sinful, or transgenderism goes against the design of God, things like this. Even if you kind of were of that inclination, that you could still you could still be public about that, and you wouldn't really face a lot of condemnation. Maybe people would kind of snicker off to the side and not really like it, but for the most part, your public image wouldn't be tarnished. But it seems over the last few years, America identifying with Christianity is starting to separate. Um, I think it was a couple years ago when the new House of Representatives came in 2021. The guy leading the prayer offered his prayer to uh, quote unquote the monotheistic God, and then some God in not Indian, but in a religion out of India. I'm forgetting the name. Forgive me, but he like started addressing his prayer to different gods, if you will. Whoa, okay, boom, right there. Nobody they're not associating America with Christianity. Um, and then you're starting to see Hollywood, definitely attack Christianity, attack someone like Chris Pratt for his beliefs to the point where he's now pretty much renouncing it. Right? It's very, very close. It's starting to sound like it. And so I think America is at a tipping point where people are going to have to decide. The reporters are going to come to you. The culture is going to come to you and is going to ask you, where do you stand on this issue? Because um, America and Christianity do not have the relationship that they used to. And if anything, it's only drifting apart further. So where are you going to stand on that? God, give us the grace and the the, the bravery to say that we're on your side, because ultimately America is another nation. It is just another nation in history. It will come and it will go, but God's kingdom lasts forever, and heaven is forever. And God is the grantor and sustainer of life. America can't even come close to that, right? God is the end all be all, the creator, and nothing would exist without him. So we owe our lives to him, and so we have to face the very serious question of who are we going to serve? What master are we going to serve? When I was reading the story, when I heard about the story, I thought of what Jesus said. He said it was mainly about money, but I think it certainly applies to any sort of false idol, and that's, you can't serve two masters. Um, you'll either favor one and grow in hate for the other, um, or you'll end up you'll end up choosing a side de facto, right? Because ultimately, when things start to become opposed, you can't be a part of both of them, right? It's contradictory. And I think as America shifts away from Christianity, my hope is that it doesn't, but as it does, as the trend has shown that it is drifting away from Christianity, we are getting to the part where we're going to have to decide where we stand. Um, so I think that's a the story with Chris Pratt. It's sad, but I think it's a good indicator of where we're at. And like I said, birthdays are a great time to take stock of where your life is at. And as we approach July 4th tomorrow, we take stock of where this country is, and see where it's going, for better, for worse, and what we can do to improve it. So, all right, that's most of the content I wanted to cover today, which is good. Shortest live stream I've done to date. Who would have thought? But before I go, just wanted to share a couple things. Uh, I started a segment a long time ago, like what I'm reading, and that's the thing I do with segments, is I like hardly ever do them. I create them, and then that's the only time I do it. Hey, here's this new segment that you'll never see again. No, here it is. So, reading a couple books that I think are absolutely fantastic. I highly, highly encourage you to read them. First one, Conservatism, a Rediscovery by Yoram Hazony. I apologies if I mispronounced that. This is a fantastic book. This is a traditional conservative belief system. This is not your right of center libertarian worldview, right? This is conservatism in its finest. And so currently, I just got done with the section on the history of conservatism, uh, the conservative roots in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, or Anglo-American tradition, rather, going back to the what would it be, the 17th and 18th century in England, and then the 18th century of the United States. It's and even the 19th, and just kind of that historical overview he does of the development of the conservative idea, and really like dispelling the popular history might tell you otherwise, but it's these conservative ideals that gave us things like the Constitution, right? We think of the Declaration of Independence, how beautiful of a document it is, and it is a beautiful, beautiful historic document. But we look at something like the Constitution and how resilient the Constitution is, um, and the fact that the Constitution was able to birth a country, the with the grandeur of America. He does a really great job of showing how the conservative values go into that. I haven't finished it, but I don't, I'm so enthralled by this book that I can't recommend it enough. And I'm excited to get into it. The other sections that I still have yet to get into are the philosophy of it, and then just sort of applying the traditional conservative framework to to modern day, right? What does that look like? And then what does a personal conservative life look like? And I think I will have some agreements with him. We will see. I have had some things that I think interesting, but great book. So far it's a great book. I can tell it's going to be a great book. I'm excited to finish it. I definitely recommend it. And I hope to be getting into content where we get to explore what a real traditional conservative worldview, uh, how that actually applies to other ideologies, to social trends, current events, all that good stuff. Another book I'm reading, The Genesis of Gender, a Christian Theory by Abigail Favale. I believe that's how you pronounce her last name, Abigail Favale. So first of all, if you're not interested in reading this book, the first thing I would tell you to do is you should um, still look into her work, because it's really, really good. The best thing I could do, if you just want to check her out for one time and move on, go to the Pints with Aquinas YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts, and look for a recent episode he did with Abigail Favale. I believe it was within the last month, maybe two. Um, Incredible story, because this woman, she was evangelical, and um, she ended up going down the track of this just radical feminism, real, postmodern philosophy, serious feminism, very pro abortion, pro, not just equality with men, but almost superiority to men, right? And she has an awakening. She comes to see the light, and she comes back to Christianity. She goes all into Christianity. She's now pro-life, right? She's even trying to show the beauty of a complementary view between a man and a woman, not this equality view, but the complementary view, which I think is the more correct view. I think it's a more Christian view of men and women, because men and women are different, but they're different in a complementary way. Who would have thought? Very revolutionary idea, I know. But I'm not fully through this book. I'm still working my way through it, but it's really good. And the key thing is that this is a person who is on the inside of this ideology, the whole gender ideology, between man and woman. I'm not sure if she goes into the trans issues. If she does, in this book, I haven't got to them. I know she has written on them and spoken on them. So what I've heard from her on that topic is very worth your while to listen to and to read. But that's just what I recommend. Another thing, while you're at it, go into subscribe to Daily Wire Plus to watch What is a Woman. Something else you'll get in your subscription, something that I get to utilize in my subscription, is now Daily Wire Plus has a channel of Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson gets his own channel on Daily Wire Plus. All of his content is there. His podcasts are there, but then he's doing an exclusive show with Daily Wire Plus, and it's called what is it? Monsters, Dragons, and Men, or something like that. I have it written down here. I don't know. I'm kind of a nerd and a Jordan Peterson fanboy, so I take notes. No shame in that. Dragons, Monsters, and Men. I got it right. Didn't even need to look at my notes. So good. He drops truth and wisdom nuggets that have so much weight, so much impact. I wish I could tell you about all of them, but they're so good. I don't want to spoil any of them. Definitely go check it out, and it's necessary content for men. It is the messages that he is telling in these episodes are just so good for men. It's what men need to hear. It goes against what the society is trying to tell men uh, who they are. It's really, really good. America needs more men. If America is going to get out of the weakness that it's in right now, the hard times that America is going through, the hard times that are on the horizon, if we don't change, America is going to need stronger men. God give us the grace to be strengthened, right? Myself included, every single man listening. Let's pray to God that He gives us the strength needed to help lift the society up and lift those around us up to something higher, bigger, better than ourselves, namely Jesus Christ Himself. But yeah, so that's just kind of the content that I've been consuming, and I hope you'll consider it. It's just been fantastic books to read, lecture series to listen to. It's been awesome. So, anyways, I think this was a fun podcast. Really, these live streams are just geared more towards what's in the news, what's going on, and let's take stock of everything. And being 4th of July, like I said, birthday's a good time to take stock. So big wins. The United States is a better country now because there's more life, more restrictions on ending the lives of the unborn have been put in place as a result of the Supreme Court. So more people are living, more people get a shot. That's more more creativity, more contributors, more people who love other people in this world. I could go on and on about the blessing of the overturning of Roe versus Wade, but the tremendous work we still have cut out for us. If you know of a pregnancy center around you, um, send them a little bit of a donation, right? A monetary donation. Find out if there's people that you know who are involved in that kind of work, and just ask them, hey, like what can I do? And this is there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And while there is more life being in there, let's give our attention and our resources to those lives that are coming in, even if it's just maybe you can't give your time, but maybe you can give perhaps a little bit of money or something like that. It's still any little bit. It's just a wonderful thing. Let's work to preserve life and to help life flourish. And so we have more life, we have more religious liberty, more freedom for the person, for the American, more freedom to worship God how He sees fit, and more freedom to protect your life, to protect that precious thing that each and every one of us has a right to, and that thing is life. And I think there's big moves in the conservative movement. Every now and then you have these conservative lawmakers who put legislation out to say, nope, you're not going to do this transgender ideology thing onto our kids. You're not going to do that. We're not going to have that here. Lately, the conservative movement, right? Excuse me, led by Matt Walsh, the great work that he's been doing with What Is a Woman, really can't emphasize that documentary enough. And one more thing I'd like to say on that: if you ever get the chance to watch that, maybe you who are listening agree with me and are totally get it on this transgender issue. But maybe you know someone who is kind of on the fence about it, right? They kind of go either way. They're not some radical lefty who's like, hey, trans the kids, but they're also not some person who's saying like, hey, transgender ideology is harmful and it's wrong. They're somewhere in the middle. This is a great film for them because it exposes what the transgender movement, the transgender ideology is, and puts it in the full light. And so you could show that person who's kind of on the fence and say, this is what it really is. Now you decide how you want to feel about that. And the more people that are educated on this are more people who have a say in the school system of their communities. More people who vote for legislators and representatives who are going to stifle this harmful ideology, who are going to put a stop to it. So the more people educated on it, the better. Absolutely. And then to recap, or to continue the recap, um, as great as America is, I'm not sure. Uh, I'm not sure how far we're going to keep going with this idea that America and Christianity are so intertwined. I think there's an interesting chance of or a decent chance, a likely chance of a separation of that idea in our culture and our society for the worst. Maybe it will be short term. That's the prayer. I, my prayer is that we do get back to it. But in the meantime, we're going to have to decide, and maybe that's deciding amongst our friends. It's deciding amongst our family. It's deciding at work. These are absolutely tough decisions, but um, at the end of the day, we have to ask who's more worth it, right? Who are we going to serve? So, with that being said, happy 4th of July Eve. Happy 4th of July. Make sure you leave out some Black Rifle coffee and some AR-15 rounds for Captain America as he visits your house tonight on the eve of July 4th. But I hope you all have a wonderful 4th of July. Something I'll just end it on this. I am incredibly hopeful for this country. I think there's a lot of things that are going wrong right now, but I think people are waking up. People know what's right, people know what's wrong, and everything that the left is telling people, everything that the secular worldview is telling people, people have gotten um, about 10 years or more of the real left wing, real secular stuff, and it's been really heavy the last couple of years. And they're saying this is nonsense. This is empty. It's devoid of any meaning, and it's ignorant. It's not in keeping with reality, and it's not fulfilling. It's not satisfying. It doesn't lead to a happy and flourishing life. More people are waking up to it. More people are seeing it. When more people see it, it's going to come to a stop. And at the end of the day, we all know that good triumphs over evil. We know that at the end of the Bible, we know who wins. Now, does that mean America wins at the end of the day? No, because America is just another passing country in the grand scheme of God's timeline. But for the time being, we have an opportunity to really dig our heels in the sand. And in some ways, I think it is a blessing, because this dividing that is happening with America and Christianity is it's separating the wheat from the chaff. The people who were just kind of Christians in name only, that's not enough. That's really not enough. The folks on the left, they don't care. They don't care. Either you completely sell out to them, or you put your foot down. It's coming to that point where you have to make a clear decision. And I say good. I say good to that, because for the longest time I think we've been plagued by a milk toast, a nominalism, if you will, in our society. And it's really, really hard to evangelize, to compete against indifference, because it's at the end of the day, indifference is just eh, it's just a shrug, right? There's no passion there. There's no passion involved, right? There's no sort of butting of heads, and sometimes the greatest strength can come out of conflict. And as the dividing line becomes more stark, there will become more conflict, and perhaps there's actually some good and some strength that can come out of the conflict. Um, of course we pray for peace, but at the end of the day, we pray for this for good to overcome. And so I say bring it on. I say bring on the opportunity to make that decision. And I pray that God gives me and each and every one of you the strength to decide right and to decide for Him, because it is scary. It is scary, absolutely. Um, what it will cost you now can be big, and if things only get worse, what it can cost you is even bigger, even scarier. So it's not lost upon me. But at the end of the day, a lot of folks are waking up, and more people are on the side of sanity and reality. I don't have a lot of hope for the left and the harmful ideology that they bring. So, with that being said, I hope you find some time to celebrate uh, the United States tomorrow. I hope you take some time to think about how lucky we are to live in this country. All of our ailments we are still in the most prosperous, wonderful country in the world, and we have so much freedom, so much opportunity in this country. And dang it, the attitude of an American is unlike any other in the world. And I believe it is a good attitude. A lot of people think we're arrogant. I frankly don't care, and that's my American attitude coming out right there. Uh, so take some time to be thankful for what you have. It's more than likely that you know someone who has served in the military. It's likely that you're related to someone who served in the military. Think of them, reach out to them, um, have a sentiment of gratitude for especially those people, the people who have defended this great nation, who have fought for our rights, and have sometimes given the ultimate sacrifice so that we can live in the most free and prosperous country. And and with that, have a free, awesome, fantastic 4th of July. Be responsible, be safe, right? Crack open a beer or two, but we're not advocating for drunkenness, even though a lot of people are going to be absolutely hammered. We just have to sigh over that. But be responsible, enjoy a good drink or two, have a cigar, watch the fireworks, hug someone you love, call someone that you know, tell them that you appreciate them, and give a gesture of gratitude to those who have fought for our freedom. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Wear your red, white, and blue, and you guys don't just have a great day, have an American day. All right, I'm out. Yeehaw.